Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever found yourself looking at a really comprehensive framework, something like COBIT 2019, and just feeling, well, a bit overwhelmed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see all the guidance, all the best practices, and you think, okay, this is great theory.
Right. But how do I actually use this? How do I make it work for my specific organization? Turn these concepts into something real, something tailored.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Frameworks give you the building blocks, the universe of what's possible. But every single enterprise is different.
Yeah, different strategies, different risks, different culture.
Precisely. So a generic one-size-fits-all governance system, it just rarely cuts it. You absolutely need to tailor it.
Exactly. And that tailoring, that practical application is what we're really digging into today. We're rolling up our sleeves.
Getting hands-on.
We're focusing on the COBIT 2019 design guide, specifically part 2, that's the execution and examples part. And within that, we're zoning in on chapter 7.
Yes, chapter 7. That's where the rubber really meets the road with the practical case studies.
Think of the session like you're joining us in a workshop. We've got the design guide examples right here, and we're going to walk through them together step by step.
Our mission today is really to show you how that COBIT design workflow, the theory we've maybe touched on before, actually plays out in these, well, fictitious but realistic scenarios from the guide.
We want you to see how those different design factors, the unique characteristics of an enterprise, directly shapes the final governance system design.
So how different contexts lead to genuinely different tailored solutions will be your guides through this practical application.
So chapter 7, its whole purpose is to illustrate that governance system design workflow, the one that's detailed back in chapter 4 of the guide.
Right. It takes the theory and applies it.
Yeah.
Shows it in action across different kinds of enterprises.
And it does mention using a companion toolkit, looks like an Excel tool, to do the quantitative heavy lifting, the calculations.
Yes, there are calculations behind the scenes. The guide uses detailed mapping tables. They link things like strategies or risks to specific governance objectives. And there's math involved, matrix calculations, weighting, normalization, to figure out how important each objective is based on those factors.
But we're not getting bogged down in the spreadsheet math today.
No, definitely not. The toolkit automates that part. Our focus is on understanding the process itself, the steps involved, and what the results actually mean for each example enterprise, interpreting the outcomes.
Got it. And the chapter structure is pretty straightforward, right? It follows the 4 main steps of the workflow for each example.
Exactly. We'll follow that sequence. Step 1, understand context and strategy. Step 2, determine the initial scope. Step 3, refine the scope. And finally, step 4, conclude the design.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's dive into that first example then, the manufacturing enterprise.
All right, example number 1.
So picture this. A classic manufacturing company. Their world is all about, production lines, managing a supply chain, keeping costs under control.
Making sure everything runs smoothly, predictably. Reliability is key. That's their basic context.
And step 1 of the COBIT workflow is all about nailing down that context and strategy.
Precisely. Step 1's job is to gather all that essential background info. What's their market like? How do they operate internally? What's their strategic direction? What risks are they worried about? What are their current headaches?
It's the foundation for everything else.
Absolutely. Everything builds on this understanding.
So, starting with step 1.1, understand enterprise strategy. The guide tells us this manufacturer identified its main strategy as cost leadership.
Makes sense for manufacturing.
Yeah. And secondary, but still important, is client service stability. The guide shows these rated pretty highly, cost leadership getting the top score.
Okay, those 2 strategies tell you a lot right away. Cost leadership means a laser focus on efficiency, optimizing everything, tight expense control.
And client service stability.
That points towards reliability, consistent quality, dependable delivery, keeping those customer relationships solid. These strategic choices act like filters, highlighting which parts of IT governance are going to be most critical for supporting the business.
Okay, then step 1.2 is understand enterprise goals. So they took the standard list of 13 COBIT enterprise goals and ranked them based on what matters most to them.
Tailoring it to their reality.
And the guide shows a clear winner. The highest ranked goal by far is EG or 9, optimization of business process costs. Got a full 5 out of 5 score. Others were ranked much lower.
That's huge. Identifying those top priority enterprise goals is absolutely fundamental. It's the starting point for the COBIT goals cascade.
The goals cascade. Remind us quickly.
It's how COBIT connects the dots. High-level business goals, like optimizing costs, get translated down into more specific IT-related goals called alignment goals. And those then map down to the specific governance and management objectives, the things IT needs to actually do well.
So if EGO9 is top dog, the whole governance system needs to be geared towards helping achieve that cost optimization.
Exactly. That high ranking for EGO9 will significantly boost the importance of any INT objectives that contribute to lowering costs or improving efficiency.
Makes sense. Next, step 1.3. Understand the risk profile. The guide says they did a high-level risk analysis, looking for INT risks that go beyond what they're comfortable accepting their risk appetite.
Right. Pinpointing the major worries.
And the analysis flagged several areas as high risk for this manufacturer. What were those?
The guide highlights a few key INT risk categories that were really concerning for them. Things related to IT investment decision-making, portfolio definition and maintenance, also program and projects lifecycle management, then IT cost and oversight, and finally IT expertise, skills, and behavior.
Okay, so translating that, they're worried about spending IT money on the wrong things, projects failing or going way over budget, not having a clear view of IT costs, and maybe not having the right people or skills in IT.
That's exactly the kind of thing. The guide actually provides lots of specific risk scenario examples elsewhere, like budgets getting blown, staff lacking critical skills, maybe problems with how they buy IT stuff, which hits cost and oversight.
Right.
But the key point for this design step is identifying these specific high-priority risk categories for this enterprise. These become direct, critical inputs into the design. They tell you where the governance system needs to build stronger controls and management practices.
Got it. Addressing the known vulnerabilities. And the last part of step 1 is 1.4. Understand current INT-related issues. This is about the current pain points, right? What's actually going wrong now?
Yes, assessing the problems they're facing today, usually rated on importance, maybe a simple 1 to 3 scale, like in the guide.
And for this manufacturer, what issues came up as important?
They flagged several things. Significant IT-related incidents, think data loss, security breaches, major project failures that have already happened. Also, service delivery problems by outsourcers, so issues with their vendors. And related to the strategy, hidden IT cost and excessively high cost of IT overall were big concerns.
So real problems that are causing pain right now.
Exactly. And acknowledging these is vital. Often, a major reason for improving governance is to fix these known problems. They show where current practices might be falling short. Building these issues into the design ensures the final system is practical and tackles the most urgent needs.
Okay, step 1 gives us a really solid picture. Cost stability-focused manufacturer, prioritizing cost optimization goals, worried about project cost skills risks, and already dealing with incidents, vendor issues, and high costs. Now, step 2. Determine the initial scope of the governance system.
Right. Step 2 is where we start translating all that context from step 1 into an initial set of priorities for the 40 COBIT governance and management objectives. It's the first cut which objectives seem most relevant based on what we just learned.
And this is where the guide's quantitative side, the mappings and calculations handled by that toolkit, really comes in.
Yes. Behind the scenes, the examples use those mapping tables. Strategies map to objectives, goals map via the cascade, risks map to objectives that act as controls, and current issues map to objectives that address them. Calculations then aggregate all this influence to give each G&M objective an initial importance score. It provides a data-driven starting point for prioritization.
Okay, so let's see how each step 1 factor influences this initial scope, starting with 2.1. Consider enterprise strategy. Theirs were cost leadership and client service stability.
Based on COBIT's strategy to objective mappings, those strategies naturally elevate objectives related to efficiency, cost management, reliable operations, service delivery relationships, quality. The basics for keeping things running smoothly and affordably.
So things like managing the IT budget.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
APO06, manage budget and costs, becomes important. Maybe BAI05, manage organizational change enablement, if they're driving efficiency changes.
Yeah.
And definitely objectives in the deliver, service, and support domain like DSS01, managed operations, DSS02, managed service requests and incidents, DSS04, managed continuity. They all support that cost and stability focus.
Makes intuitive sense. If that's your strategy, those are the IT areas you need to nail.
Precisely. Then, step 2.2. Consider enterprise goals and apply the COBIT goals cascade. We take their top goal, EGO9 optimization of business process costs, and run it through the cascade. Enterprise goal, alignment goal, NEST G&M objectives.
And because EGO9 was number 1, objectives tied to cost optimization and efficiency would get a big boost here.
Absolutely. This step would strongly highlight things like APO06, manage budget, and costs again. Maybe APO4 managed innovation, but viewed through an efficiency lens innovation that cuts costs. Definitely MEA01. Managed performance and conformance monitoring, you need to measure costs to optimize them. And also objectives around risk and compliance, like APO12, EDM03, MEA03. Managing risk and complying avoids costly failures or fines, which supports both cost leadership and stability.
Okay. Then step 2.3, consider the risk profile. We take those high-risk areas like project failures, cost issues, skills gaps.
And we use the risk to objective mappings to see which G&M objectives function as controls or good practices to mitigate those specific risks.
So project risks would highlight.
Objectives like BAA01 managed programs and BAA11 managed projects. Cost oversight risks point again to APO06.
Yep.
Managed budget and costs, maybe APO8 managed relationships if vendor costs are an issue. Skills risks highlight APO7 managed human resources.
Yeah.
Investment decision risks point to APO05 managed portfolio and APO12 managed risk. Operational and security risks could bring in DSS04 managed continuity and APO13 managed security.
So the things they're most worried about directly point to the IT processes they need to strengthen.
Exactly. These are the areas where weak management could really hurt them.
And finally, step 2.4. Consider current INT-related issues. The incidents, outsourcing problems, high costs.
Right. We map those pain points to the G&M objectives that, if improved, would directly help resolve them. The mapping is often quite clear here.
Incidents point to
DSS02 managed service requests and incidents, DSS03 managed problems. Also, security objectives like APO13 and DSS05 if there are security incidents. Outsourcing problems point clearly to APO09 managed service agreements, APO10 managed vendors, and MEA01 for monitoring vendor performance. High cost issues reinforce APO6, and maybe things like asset management, BAO09, or configuration management, BAI10, if costs stem from poorly managed infrastructure.
So the governance system isn't just about the future, it's about fixing today's problems too.
Absolutely. It provides the structure to build the capabilities needed to tackle those existing issues.
Okay, after looking at strategy, goals, risk, and issues individually, step 2.5 gives us the initial scope summary. This combines everything.
Yes, using a weighted summation. Each of those 4 factors contributes to the overall importance score for each G&M objective. The guide mentions the default weight is usually 1, but enterprises can tweak that. This gives a combined initial priority ranking.
And for this manufacturing enterprise, what did that initial ranking highlight as most important?
The source points out the top management objectives that emerged from this first pass. They were BII09 managed assets, DSS02 managed service requests and incidents, DSS03 managed problems, BII10 managed configuration, and APO12 managed risk.
Interesting list. Heavy on the operational side, incidents, problems, assets, configuration, plus risk management.
Exactly, and naturally some other objectives scored lower initially. Things focused purely on, say, cutting-edge innovation, APO4, or maybe high-level strategy setting, APO02, weren't top priorities based only on these initial factors.
But you stress this is just the initial scope.
Crucially, yes. This is just the first cut. Step 3 brings in the other design factors, and they can significantly refine these priorities.
Okay, let's move into step 3 then. Refine the scope of the governance system. This is where the second set of design factors comes in.
Right. Things like threat landscape, compliance requirements, the role IT plays, how IT is sourced, IT implementation methods, technology adoption strategy, and the enterprise size itself.
And the guide gives us the assessment for the manufacturing enterprise on these factors.
It does. It summarizes their situation.
No.
They face a high-threat landscape, rated 90% high. They have normal compliance requirements, mostly. Its role is seen as factory, critical for operations, not innovation. Sourcing is a mix of insourced, 80%, and outsourcing, 20%. They use traditional IT implementation methods exclusively. Their technology adoption strategy is primarily follower, and they are a large enterprise.
Okay, quite a specific profile. Let's see how these refine the priorities, starting with 3.1. Consider the threat landscape. 90% high threat. That sounds significant.
It is. Operating in a high-threat environment drastically increases the importance of anything related to security and risk management.
So objectives like?
Objectives in the governance domain, EDM, like ADM01, setting the framework, and EDM's 03, ensuring risk optimization, become more critical. Planning objectives like APO13 managed security shoot way up in priority. And operational objectives like DSS05 managed security services and DSS04 managed continuity also gain importance. Basically anything that hardens the defenses or improves resilience.
And the guide also mentions specific components needed.
Yes, this factor highlights the need for things beyond just processes, like organizational structures, maybe a dedicated security committee, a CISO role, cultural elements like strong security awareness training, and specific information flows like having a formal security policy and strategy documented and communicated. It also explicitly points to needing the information security focus area guidance from COBIT.
Makes total sense. High threat means high focus on security governance. What about 3.2, compliance requirements? Assessed as mostly normal.
Right, 75% normal, 25% low. For this enterprise, with predominantly normal-low compliance needs, this factor doesn't dramatically shift the priorities. The guide shows only a very slight bump for a few objectives tied to governance: DDM01, EDM03, risk, APO12, and compliance monitoring, MEA03. It's necessary, but not a major driver of differentiation for them compared to other factors.
Okay. Step 3.3. Consider the role of IT. Assessed as factory, what does that imply?
Factory IT means IT is essential for keeping the lights on, for running the core business operations, in this case, manufacturing. But it's not really seen as the engine for new products or market strategies.
So it needs to be reliable, like a utility.
Exactly. And that perspective boosts the importance of objectives focused on operational reliability, service delivery, and resilience. Things like EDM03 risk optimization, avoiding disruptions, and a whole suite of DSS objectives. DSS01 operations, DSS02 incidents, DSS03 problems, DSS04 continuity, DSS05 security services. It's all about ensuring that core IT engine runs smoothly and dependably. Security, information security focus area, is also crucial here to keep the factory running.
That role of IT factor seems really key in shaping the focus.
What about 3.4? Sourcing model. These a mix, 80% insourced, 20% outsourced.
The main impact of the sourcing model is on objectives needed to manage those external relationships. Since they do some outsourcing, objectives like APO09 managed service agreements and APO10 managed vendors become important. And you need to monitor performance, so MEA01 managed performance and conformance monitoring gains relevance too. This factor also points towards needing the vendor management focus area guidance.
Got it. Need to manage those third parties. Step 3.5, IT implementation methods, 100% traditional.
When an enterprise is purely traditional, using waterfall or similar methods versus agile or DevOps, this factor doesn't really change the relative priorities of the core COBIT objectives much. The guide basically says the standard COBIT model provides the right guidance here without needing specific tweaks driven solely by the traditional label.
Okay. And step 3.6, technology adoption strategy. They're mostly a follower. Right, 90% follower, 10% slow adopter. They tend to adopt tech only after it's well proven elsewhere. You might think this lowers the importance of innovation objectives. But the guide notes that objectives like APO2 managed strategy, APO44 managed innovation, and BAI01 managed programs are still relevant. Even followers need processes to scan the horizon, evaluate proven technologies, plan their adoption strategically, and manage the implementation projects. They still need to integrate technology effectively, just not bleeding-edge tech. The core COBIT model applies.
Interesting. So even following requires a strategy. Lastly, 3.7, enterprise size. They're large.
The guide is clear on this. Size doesn't change the priority or the target capability level of the objectives. Its only role is to tell you whether you should consider the SME, small and medium enterprise focus area guidance. Since this company is large, the standard core COBIT guidance is the default, and the SME guidance isn't specifically indicated by this factor.
Right. So after running through all those step 3 refinements, we finally reach step 4, conclude the governance solution design. This pulls everything together.
Exactly. Step 4 synthesizes the results from Step 2, initial scope, and Step 3, refinements. It resolves any conflicts, incorporates final judgment, and produces the final tailored design. That includes the prioritized list of objectives and, critically, their target capability levels.
And the guide shows the combined results after factoring everything in for this manufacturer.
Yes. And based on that final synthesis, the source highlights the management objectives that now stand out as most important after the Step 3 refinement. The list looks like this. DSS02 managed service requests and incidents is top with the priority score of 100. Then, rated at 80, come APO13 managed security and DSS04 managed continuity.
Yeah.
Following those at 75 are DSS03 managed problems, VAI09 managed assets, and BAI10 managed configuration.
Okay, let's quickly compare that to the initial top 5 from step 2.5, which was BAI09, DSS02, DSS03, BI10, and APO12. The final top group is DSS02, APO13, DSS04, DSS03, BAI9, BAI10.
See the shift. DSS ABO2, DSS03, BAI 009, BAI 10 are still high. The operational focus remains. But APO12 managed risk slips slightly out of that very top tier, while APO13 managed security and DSS04 managed continuity surged right up there,
Driven by.
directly reflecting the strong influence of those Step 3 factors we just discussed, especially the high-threat landscape and the factory role of IT. Both heavily emphasize security and keeping operations continuous. This really shows the tailoring in action.
It really does. The context changed the outcome. The source also mentions that even after this data-driven result, the enterprise might make some final manual tweaks.
Yes, that's an important point. Human judgment still plays a role. The example says that after seeing the calculated priorities, the leadership team decided to boost the scores for APOs 06, managed budgeting costs, and EDM 04 ensured resource optimization, adding 75 points to each. They also slightly lowered DSS 02 managed service request incidents by 25 points.
Why would they do that?
Maybe they have a particularly stubborn problem with hidden IT costs they're determined to fix, boosting APO6. Or perhaps there's a strong executive mandate around resource efficiency, boosting EDM04. It shows that the calculated priorities are a strong guide, but specific strategic imperatives or deep-seated issues can lead to informed adjustments.
Okay, so taking the final synthesized priorities, plus those manual adjustments, they arrive at the definitive set of G&M objectives for their first phase of implementation, along with the target process capability levels.
Correct. And the guide explains their logic for setting those levels in this example. If an objective's final importance score was 75 or higher, they aimed for capability level 4. If it was 50 or higher, they aimed for level 3.
And which objectives ended up with those higher target levels 3 or 4?
Looking at their final list, EDM04 resource optimization adjusted up is targeted at level 3. APO 06 budget and costs also adjusted up is targeted at level 4. APO 12 risk is level 3, and APO 13 security is level 4.
Remind us what levels 3 and 4 mean politically.
Sure, level 3 means the process is established. It's well-defined, documented, uses standard procedures and tools, and generally achieves its purpose consistently. Level 4 is predictable. It builds on level 3 by adding quantitative measurement. Performance is actively measured against targets, data is analyzed, and corrective actions are taken based on that data.
So aiming for level 4 on budget cost management, APO 06, and security, APO 13, means this manufacturer wants really mature, data-driven processes in those critical areas. And level 3 for things like risk and resource optimization means they want well-defined, organized processes there.
Exactly. It reflects where they need the most rigor based on their context.
Beyond the objectives and levels, Step 4 also defines other key components for their governance system. What supporting elements did they identify?
To make it all work, especially with the focus on security and risk, they identified specific organizational structures needed, like that dedicated security strategy committee and the CISO role we mentioned. Also, fostering adequate security awareness as a cultural element, and ensuring key information items and flows exist, like having a formal security policy and a documented security strategy. These are the enablers.
And finally, which specific COBIT focus area guidance did the design process point them towards?
Based on their high-threat landscape, risk profile, and current issues, the information security focus area guidance is obviously fundamental for them. And because they do some outsourcing and might explore DevOps later, the guide suggests using the vendor management and potentially the DevOps focus areas where relevant to further tailor COBIT in those specific contexts.
Wow, okay, that was a really detailed walkthrough, just one example. But you can absolutely see how that structured workflow takes all the unique characteristics of this manufacturer and systematically turns them into a very specific, tailored governance plan. Priorities, maturity targets, supporting structures. It's not generic at all.
It really demonstrates the value of tailoring. And what's great is seeing how different starting points, different contexts, lead to genuinely different outcomes, as the next examples will show.
All right, let's switch gears then. Example 2. A medium-sized, innovative company. The name alone tells us we're in a different world now. Medium-sized and focused on innovation.
Completely different context, yes. So let's look at their step 1, understanding context and strategy.
Okay, what are their key inputs?
Their primary strategy is innovation differentiation. Secondary is growth acquisition, a huge contrast to the manufacturer's costability focus. This strategy alone will steer IT priorities in a very different direction.
And their enterprise goals.
They reflect that innovation drive. High-rank goals relate to things like having a competitive portfolio, e.g. ISO 1, Digital transformation, EG04, EG11, EG12. Business continuity, EG06, still important. Security, EG10, protecting innovation. And fostering innovation itself, EG13. Much more outward-looking and growth-oriented than example 1.
What about their risk profile?
It aligns with innovation and growth concerns. High-risk categories involve IT investment portfolio management, making sure they bet on the right innovations. Also, IT expertise and skills, having the talent for new tech, and specific risks tied directly to technology-based innovation.
And their current INT issues, what pains are they feeling?
It paints a picture you often see in fast-moving, innovative places. Things like frustration between business and IT. Maybe IT isn't seen as agile enough. Project failures, which can be common with complex new stuff. Knowledge gaps, keeping skills current is tough. Issues with end-user computing. Security incidents are still there. And even outsourcing problems. Some overlap with the manufacturer, but things like frustration and knowledge gaps really point to the challenges of supporting rapid change and innovation.
Okay, so step 1 paints a picture of a company trying to create, grow, and move fast, but hitting friction points around alignment, skills, and execution that often come with that territory.
Exactly. The context immediately suggests that objectives around planning new things, building quickly, managing talent, and being agile are going to be vital.
So, on to step 2. Determine the initial scope. Again, this combines the influence of strategy, goals, risk, and issues on the G&M objectives.
Right. Running those step 1 factors through the mappings and calculations give their initial priority list. The guide highlights the top management objectives from this initial scope. It's quite a different list. APO03, Managed Enterprise Architecture. APO4, Managed Innovation. BAI02, Managed Requirements Definition. BAEI03, Managed Solutions Identification and Build. BAI08, Managed Knowledge. BAI10, Managed Configuration. And BAI06, Managed IT Changes. The source seems to list APO3 twice initially, but these are the distinct objectives mentioned.
Wow, yeah, that's a stark contrast. The manufacturer was all about operations and assets. This is heavily focused on planning, architecture, innovation, and building. Requirements, solutions, knowledge, configuration, changes. Makes total sense for an innovative company.
It directly reflects their strategy and context, doesn't it? The initial priorities are already very different.
Okay, now step 3, refine the scope. Bringing in the other design factors, what's the assessment for this innovative company?
Let's run through them. Threat landscape. Assessed as high, but only 50%, with 50% normal. Still high enough to make security and risk objectives important, EDMs 01, EDMs 03, APO 12, APO 13, DSS 05, but maybe not quite the overwhelming driver as in the next example we'll see. Compliance requirements, 100% normal. Like example 1, minimal impact on shifting priorities significantly. Role of IT. Assessed as strategic. This is a game changer compared to factory. Strategic IT means IT is a core partner in driving business strategy and innovation.
So that elevates pretty much everything.
Almost. It gives high importance to objectives across the board. Governance, EDM, planning, APO, building BAI, and operations, DSS. If IT is strategic, you need maturity everywhere. The source also mentions needing components for bimodal IT or ambidexterity here, like a chief digital officer, staff who can handle both stability and agility, integrated portfolio innovation processes. The digital transformation focus area is relevant. Sourcing model, 100% cloud, all in on cloud, unlike the manufacturer's mix. This massively boosts the importance of APO 09, service agreements, APO 10, vendors, and MEA 01, performance monitoring. Cloud governance is key. The cloud focus area guidance is critical. IT implementation methods, mostly DevOps, 75% with some Agile, 25%. Again, fundamentally different from traditional. This emphasizes objectives around rapid building, BAI 03, and managing frequent changes. BAI 06, BAI 07, BAI 12. DevOps and Agile focus areas are essential. Technology adoption strategy, mostly first mover, 75%. They want to be ahead of the curve.
This requires strong processes for strategy, APO incubation, APO 44, portfolio, APO 5, relationships, APO 8, maybe tech partners. Building BAI and monitoring MEA 01 and assess pilots. DevOps and digital transformation focus areas support this. Enterprise size, medium, this signals that the SME focus area guidance should be considered alongside the core model to ensure practicality.
Okay, so their choices around being innovative, strategic IT, cloud first, DevOps agile, and being a first mover really reshape the priorities dramatically compared to the manufacturer.
Absolutely. These factors push for maturity in planning, building, changing, and vendor management, reflecting a very dynamic environment.
Which leads us to step 4, conclude the governance solution design, synthesizing the initial scope and all those step 3 refinements.
Right. The guide shows the combined priorities after all factors. The top management objectives that emerge are APO 3, Managed Enterprise Architecture at 100, APO 4, Managed Innovation at 90, APO 7, Managed Human Resources at 85, BAI 10, Managed Configuration at 85, BAI 03, Managed Solutions Identification and Build at 70, and BAI 07, Managed IT Change Acceptance and Transitioning at 70.
Comparing that to their initial list, architecture and innovation are still top. Build and configuration remain high, but APO 7 human resources jumped up significantly in priority.
Good catch. That likely reflects the need to address those skills risks and knowledge gaps identified in Step 1, which become even more critical when you have a strategic IT role and are trying to be a first mover with new tech. The source notes that overall, most objectives gained importance because of the threat landscape and strategic IT role demanding broader maturity. This company didn't make any manual adjustments.
Okay, so what about their final target process capability level?
Using the same 75% for level 4, 50% for level 3 logic, this company sets quite a few objectives at higher levels.
Which ones stand out?
In the governance domain, EDM 02, benefits delivery, and EDM 03, risk optimization, are targeted at level 3. Critically for their strategy, APO 03, architecture, APO 04, innovation, and APO 7, human resources, are all targeted at level 4. Several other important planning and building objectives, APO 5, portfolio, APO 8, relationships, APO 12, risk, APO 13, security, APO 14, data, are set for level 3.
That's a lot more emphasis on level 3 and 4 maturity across planning and governance compared to the manufacturer.
It is. It shows the design process pushing for higher capability across a wider range of activities needed to support a strategic, innovative, cloud-based, agile operation while still managing the risks involved. It demands a more sophisticated governance system overall.
What about the other supporting components identified for them?
They also need the security basics roles, like a CISO, awareness, policies. But reflecting their specific context, they also identified the need for a chief digital officer, CDO, staff with those ambidextrous skills, and integrated portfolio innovation processes. These are quite distinct from example 1, tailored to their digital innovation focus.
And the specific COBIT focus area guidance they'll use?
It's a broader set. Because they're medium-sized, the SME focus area, due to threats risks, the information security focus area. And critically, given their operating model and strategy, the DevOps, cloud, and digital transformation focus areas. This suite of guidance is tailored precisely to their modern dynamic environment.
It's fascinating. Same workflow, totally different company profile, totally different tailored governance outcome. The framework adapts.
Exactly. The third example, the government agency, provides yet another contrast.
All right, let's tackle example 3. A high-profile government agency immediately brings to mind things like public service, heavy regulation, scrutiny, maybe legacy systems?
That's the picture, described as large, decentralized, providing critical public services, healthcare, finance, education. Key context points. Heavily regulated, very high threat exposure. The guide specifically mentions they suffered a recent major hack. They use traditional IT methods and have a history of audit findings pointing out weaknesses.
Okay, so step 1, understanding context and strategy. What are the inputs here?
Strategy. Primary is client service stability. Secondary is cost leadership. Similar labels to the manufacturer, but client service in a government context likely means reliable citizen services and access, a different flavor. Goals. Their top goals are heavily weighted towards compliance, security, quality, and following internal policies. Makes sense for government trust, accountability, handling sensitive data securely. Risk profile. This is huge for them. The guide notes an extensive list of high-risk categories. Security risks are paramount, obviously amplified by the hack. Compliance risks due to regulation. Third-party risks, though they're mostly insourced here. Data integrity and privacy risks, critical. Project risks, operational risks. It's a long list. That recent hack is a massive driver. INT-related issues, also a very broad range of problems. It's significant incidents, especially the security breach. Some outsourcing problems persist, high IT costs, issues stemming from a complex structure, major data quality accessibility problems, and a lack of perceived value from IT among stakeholders.
Wow. Step 1 paints a picture of serious widespread challenges. A large, complex, regulated entity reeling from a major breach, struggling with costs, data structure, and needing to rebuild trust and control. Urgency seems high.
Absolutely. The context heavily points towards needing strong controls, security, reliability, and fixing fundamental operational issues. The source summary is a bit more condensed for this example, especially in Step 3, but let's look at Step 2, determine initial scope.
Okay, combining those intense Step 1 factors, what's the initial priority list?
The guide lists the objectives scoring 60 or higher initially. APO 13 managed security is at the absolute top, 100. APO 12 managed risk is at 80. DSSO2 managed service requests and incidents at 75. BAI04 managed availability and capacity also at 75. And BI09 managed assets at 60.
Heavily skewed to security, risk, and core operations assets. Directly reflects Step 1's inputs. The source also mentions they made management adjustments even at this early stage.
Yes, similar to example 1. They decided to manually increase the importance of APO02 managed strategy, recognizing a need for better IT planning, and decrease APO9 managed service agreements, likely because they are mostly insourced. Shows proactive management input.
Okay, now Step 3, refine the scope. The source summarizes the factor assessments.
It does. Key factors. Threat landscape is high, 100%. Compliance requirements are also high, 100%. Role of IT is strategic. Sourcing model is insourced, 100%. Implementation is traditional, 100%. Technology adoption is follower, 100%. And size is large.
So 100% high on both threat and compliance. That must have a huge impact.
Massive. The source notes this combination drives up the importance of security, risk, and compliance objectives across the board. EDM01, EDM03, APO12, APO13, MEA03, MEA04. The strategic IT role also elevates objectives broadly, but here strategic probably means essential for reliably delivering core public services securely. The other factors, insourced, traditional follower, have minimal differential impact, mainly reinforcing the use of core COBIT guidance.
Got it. So, Step 4, conclude the governance solution design, synthesizing everything, including management input.
Right. The guide shows the final priorities after all factors. The objectives scoring 60 or higher are APO13, managed security, still at 100, EDM03, ensured risk optimization at 70, BAI09, managed assets at 65, BAI10, managed configuration, also at 65, APO12, managed risk at 60, and APO02, managed strategy at 60, reflecting that earlier management boost.
Security and risk remain paramount as expected, but core IT management basics like assets and configuration are right up there too, plus strategy shows a need for broad improvement.
Exactly. Now looking at their final decided target process capability levels, this example uniquely shows both the suggested level from the calculation and the decided level chosen by the agency.
And you mentioned the decided levels were often higher.
Yes, significantly in some cases.
Yeah.
This agency clearly felt they needed a higher standard of maturity than the raw numbers suggested, likely due to regulation, audits, and the post-hack imperative.
Which objectives did they target for higher levels?
Notably, all 5 governance objectives, EDM01 through EDM05, were set at a decided level of 3. That's a strong commitment to establishing well-defined governance across the board.
And for the management objectives?
Key objectives like APO12 managed risk, APO13 managed security, and APO14 managed data were all pushed to a decided level of 4.
Level 4 for risk, security, and data management. That's aiming high.
It's a very strong statement. It means they want not just defined processes, but quantitatively measured performance in those absolutely critical areas, given their context. Setting multiple governance, EDM, and key planning risk data, APO objectives to level 3 or 4, shows a comprehensive drive for robust governance and management, addressing their specific vulnerabilities and mandates. Even project management, BAI01, BAI11, was targeted at level 3 to tackle those project failure issues.
What about their supporting components? Any differences there?
Yes. Reflecting their size and complexity, they defined a more elaborate set of organizational structures: a strategic management council, an IT leadership board, separate boards for budget near-term issues, and programming long-term issues. They also highlighted specific planning processes like workforce and capital asset planning. Awareness components focused on risk, security, and privacy, reflecting their sensitive data. This detailed structure seems necessary for governing such a large, scrutinized public entity.
And their COBIT focus area guidance.
Given the extreme threat level, risks, and issues, the risk focus area and the information security focus area were identified as the primary sources of tailored guidance for them.
Okay. So walking through these 3 very different examples, the cost-focused manufacturer, the fast-moving innovator, and the security-conscious government agency, it really drives home how this COBIT design workflow works in practice.
It really does. It provides that structured path to tailor governance. You start by deeply understanding the specific enterprise.
Yeah, their strategy, goals, risks, current problems. Step 1.
Then you use that, often with the help of the guide's mappings, to get an initial idea of which COBIT objectives matter most. Step 2.
Which you then refine by layering in those other factors: threat, compliance, IT role, sourcing, methods, tech adoption in Step 3.
Exactly. And finally, in Step 4, you synthesize it all. Maybe add some expert judgment or strategic direction and define the final priorities. the target maturity levels, and the key supporting components and focus areas needed.
And the result isn't generic, it's specific to that enterprise.
That's the whole point. It's a bespoke solution designed to tackle their most critical needs and challenges. We saw 3 examples, 3 very different tailored outcomes. It makes governance practical, relevant, effective.
It moves beyond just knowing the framework exists.
To knowing how to actually apply it effectively where you work. Making the framework fit the organization, not the other way around.
Okay, so here's something for you, our listeners, to think about as we wrap up. Consider your own enterprise context. What really defines your organization?
Yeah, what are your primary strategies? Could you rate them? What business goals are absolutely critical?
And think about risk. If you had to list the top INT risks that cause real concern for leadership, what would they be? What about the current INT issues, the things causing pain right now?
Now imagine applying this structured 4-step approach, even just mentally, using your context. How might that start to highlight governance priorities that maybe aren't top of mind today?
And reflecting on the different outcomes we saw for the manufacturer, the innovator, and the government agency, how does understanding their journeys help you anticipate what a tailored governance solution might look like for your unique situation? Something to mull over.